Hello students, this is Dr. Shell here, giving you just a brief introduction to this unit, which in your syllabus is called Removing the Dead Wood. So first of all, we had to clear the brush in our first unit. In this second module, we're going to be cutting away some stuff that passes off as logic sometimes, but is in fact not. And we often lump that all together and call it fallacies, logical fallacies, sometimes called informal fallacies. You might have had some of this in maybe an English class, if you had a good English class where you were looking at oftentimes how advertisers use logical fallacies to try to persuade us. So logical arguments are supposed to sort of proceed on this level. I give you a premise, and it's supposed to lead to a conclusion. You only need two statements to have an argument: a premise that is supposed to lead to a conclusion. So I'm arguing that if my premises are correct, that they should lead to the conclusion that I am presenting. These could be all kinds of things. I could say, because I'm very hungry and because there is no food in the refrigerator, therefore we should go out to dinner. My conclusion is we should go out to dinner. Why? Because I'm hungry is one premise. Second premise is that there's no food in the refrigerator. And that's the way arguments are supposed to proceed. Premise to conclusion. And they can be very complicated premises. They can be a very complicated conclusion. It doesn't have to be simple. But that's the way it's supposed to roll. Now, in a logical fallacy, particularly what we're looking at here are informal fallacies. That is, it has nothing to do with the actual argument itself. It's gone sideways. So if I tell you, well, only an idiot would believe that, or, it's always been the case. These are logical fallacies that I'm using to try to bolster my conclusion because the premises don't get me there. Since I can't present you a premise that leads you to my conclusion, I'm going to add something extra that's not actually part of the argument. So if I say, if you don't agree with me, I'm going to punch you in the nose, that's called an appeal to threat or a fear. So I'm introducing fear and the threat of violence to persuade you to my conclusion because my premises don't get us there. And so this unit, this module, is going to look at logical fallacies. You're going to, and then also the idea of fake news, and we're going to look at all of those things together. So you're going to want to make sure that you read the textbook carefully, take the quizzes. Then you're going to actually have to go find an example of fake news, and you're going to have to show how you would go about finding out that it's fake, proving that it's fake. And then you're going to take the crazy radio show fallacy project. So that's where we're going. Let me talk to you a little bit more about fake news. All right, so at the risk of being crass, let's just talk about bullshit for a little while. Actually, there's two serious academic works dealing with this. One of them is by the same author of our textbook, who wrote a book called Believing Bullshit, and how to not get sucked into black holes of error. And then there's another very famous little essay called On Bullshit. It's a short little book. It's really good. I just wish it wasn't on a little hardback so it wouldn't be so expensive. But I want to talk a little bit about how these fallacies get rolled out, and let's talk a little bit about those terms. So now what I'm going to ask you to do right here is to pause this video. There's a link in our course to a little worksheet called I think it's called On Bullshit. It's a little worksheet. I want you to pause this video, and I want you to go through those words. There's about 6 words, and I'd like you to write your definition of those words. Write down what you think the difference is. For example, truth, lie, satire. So work your way through this little worksheet. Write down your definition of those words, and then continue this lecture. All right, so let's just walk through these terms a little bit, and I want you to look at your definitions. And I'm not going to go by Webster. I mean, there are lots of different ways we could define these terms. But in form of logic and in terms of sort of spotting logical fallacies when they point out, we need to be clear about what we mean by these terms. So to start out with, when we say something is true or it is the truth, we mean that it corresponds to some reality. That the statement I'm making corresponds to some form of reality. And I intend for you to understand that I think it's true, I believe it's true, and I am assuming that it is in fact the case. Now, a lie is when I know that what I'm saying is not true. Okay, so I know, I'm just saying straight out what I know to be false. Okay, now that's different than a mistake. So when I tell you something and I say to you that I think St. Louis is the capital of Missouri, okay, now I know that's a lie because I know the truth. I know, in fact, it is not St. Louis, Missouri. It's Jefferson City, Missouri. So I know that what I'm telling you is a lie. Now, it could be the case that somebody would tell you that St. Louis is the capital of Missouri, and they're not lying. They are mistaken. They actually think that it is correct. So we want to draw a distinction between lying, which is when you say something that you know is not true, to a mistake where I thought it was true, I just was wrong. And when I'm corrected, I now need to correct that statement or I will be lying. Okay? And one of the things I'm going to use here is important to distinguish that either there is what you know to be true or what you should have known or could have known. So if I perpetuate a lie, and I'm in my review for the assignment that you have for this unit, which is about finding fake news. I'm talking to you about a thing that went around the internet that said that Kamala Harris did not actually swear in on a Bible, that she put her purse between her hand and the Bible so that she wouldn't actually be touching the Bible. Now, that's a lie. That is not true. And now, the person who perpetuated this lie, if we were going to be kind, we would say, well, maybe she was just mistaken, okay? But first of all, she said it was true, and before she went around saying it, that person has the duty to make sure that what they say is correct. And you could have easily have checked that. So even if you don't know for a fact, if you could have known the facts and yet you just went on to treat what you thought as if it was the truth, I think that's a form of lying as well. In other words, you knew or should have known that what you were saying is not true. Now, let's move on. Now, so when we get into, say, for example, comedy or satire, now this is where I know I'm not telling the truth, but I don't expect you to think it's the truth. If you watch any of the sort of late night comedy shows, or if you read The Onion, there was a very famous satirical piece called A Modest Proposal in the middle of the potato famine, where Jonathan Swift suggested that maybe we should just eat the Irish children, and that would end it would end poverty, it would end the famine, and it would provide, free meat. He wasn't serious. He didn't expect anybody to think that he was actually he was suggesting this as a true idea. He was being very sarcastic and trying to point out how callous the British were being toward the Irish in the midst of that crisis. So satires and jokes are not true, but they're not lies, because I don't think it's true, and I don't expect you to think it's true. The same thing with fiction. If I write a play, a novel, a short story, a poem, when I'm writing something that is a work of fiction, then I don't expect you to think that I'm telling the truth or these are real facts, and we're all on the same page, right? You should know the genre that you're reading or the kind of movie you went to watch. So you know when you go in to see it that this is not a portrayal of anything that is fact. Now, this is where my humanities, that is the study of the humanities that's rooted in philosophy, is that now, just because something isn't fact doesn't mean it's not true. So I could read a very, very profound novel, for example, The Brothers Karamazov, which is complete fiction, but contains a lot of truth. So fiction can be used to illustrate truth with a capital T, but it's not fact, and the author doesn't think that you should go looking for these fictitious cities or these people because they don't exist. They are, in fact, a fiction. So then we've talked about fiction, satire, and then there's another category which is just flat out bullshit, right? In other words, you're sitting around and you go to visit with Uncle Meb, and he's telling some fishing story, and you know he's not telling the truth. He knows he's not telling the truth. We're just chewing the fat. We're just talking, and nobody thinks that anything that's being said is actually true. It's just shooting the breeze, and it's just nonsense. And unfortunately, more and more of our discourse is on this level, which is nobody takes anybody serious because we don't think they're actually speaking the truth. Now, that gets us to fake news. So you're going to need to read our textbook very closely on this point because it's really important to understand. So fake news is knowingly presenting as true something that you know is not true, and you're presenting it as news. Okay? Not social commentary, not opinion, that you're literally presenting it in the format that says you should take this to be true, when in fact it is knowingly false. Okay? So again, this is different, and you can have all the opinions in the world you want, and I can listen to your opinion, and I think a lot of it, or I think it's just bullshit or whatever. But I know it's an opinion. But when you present it in a format that says this is news, then you have an obligation to make sure that it is fact and not falsehood that you are trying to use for other means. So read that chapter very carefully, because it's going to talk about propaganda, and it's going to other things too that you're going to need to make sure you can understand. Okay, let me talk to you just a little bit about a couple of the assignments that are due in this module. Mostly I want to talk about the example of fake news, and then the radio show bingo that you're going to do. All right, so you have a discussion essay due about fake news. Now, the trickiest part here is you've got to find an example of fake news. So don't go on the internet and search fake news, because what you're going to most likely get is a discussion about fake news. So you're going to find articles that talk about different kinds of fake news and that kind of thing. What I want you to do is find a real example of somebody trying to present something as true that is not. Okay, and it can be social media, it can be on any kind of real media, but you need to demonstrate that they know that it's not true, or they easily should have known that it was not true. They just chose not to even look into it. And so I give you my example here of the Kamala Harris not swearing out on a Bible. And in fact, you can see from another angle that didn't take me 10 seconds to find that in fact she has 2 Bibles that she is swearing in on. And there was discussion about that during the inauguration. So what you want to do is you want to find an article or an example of fake news. You want to explain the article that you wrote, to tell us about it, just generally what's the article about. And then you want to say, how did you prove that it's fake news? What can you bring to the table to say this is not true? Okay. And so I've listed here a couple of things that the person that presented this could easily have known that this was not true. And then I give you a website that connects you to that proof, that evidence. So you're going to find an actual example of somebody promoting fake news. Then you're going to explain how we know it's not true. And you're going to need to make sure that you cite a source that helped you debunk that fake news. So you're going to write that in a form of, like I just did there, a little write-up. It's not really an essay, but again, you're going to write a good paragraph explaining it, breaking down how you knew it was false, give the link to your evidence. You're going to post that. Then you're going to look at other students and see what they're doing and give feedback on their analysis of fake news and see what they found and how they went about proving that it was fake news. So that's that assignment on fake news. And then the final piece you have is the assignment on logical fallacy bingo. So it's a radio show that I did where I committed all manner of logical fallacies as I was trying to persuade people on this talk radio show that I should be the dog catcher. So you're going to listen to it, and you will see in the assignment, read the assignment really carefully, there's a link to a bingo card. So there's several different ones. Click on it, print yourself a bingo card. Then as you listen to the radio show, you're going to be listening for logical fallacies that are committed in the course of the radio show that match your card. Okay? And then you're going to cross them out as you hear them. So obviously what you're going to need to do is make sure that you know what those logical fallacies are that are on your card. I have several links to sites that go over a variety of logical fallacies. Once you've got the card, you could easily search them online and then make sure you understand the definitions. Then as you listen, you're going to like, aha, that's a straw man fallacy. You're going to cross it out. Now, when you go to submit this assignment, you need to submit a picture of the actual card where you've crossed it out. And you've got a couple options. You can do 1 bingo, 2 bingos, or 3 bingos, depending on how many points you want to earn. And then at the bottom of the card or on a separate sheet of paper as you connect to this assignment, you need to write out what fallacies you heard and what was said that actually committed that fallacy. Now, it could be me, it could be the radio host, or it could be the people that call in that commit the fallacies. So you will see I have an example there. Okay, so if you find a fallacy and say, oh, there's the straw man fallacy. And then you write, so-and-so committed the straw man fallacy because they said the X, Y, and Z. So you're going to show me that you knew the fallacy, you heard it when it happened, and you could explain it when you heard it. This is why I call these logic in the wild or unit applications, because I want to know in the real world, could you spot it when you hear it? When somebody tries to use a logical fallacy on you, can you see it or hear it? So make sure that you read the assignment carefully, download your card, make sure you know all the parts, all the terms on your card, listen to the radio show, and then submit that. And again, please drop in on online office hours so that we can talk about it if you have any questions before it's due. And then make sure you look at the assignments. There's some quizzes connected to this unit as well. So I think you'll find the radio show entertaining, and I'm anxious to see what kind of fake news you are able to find out there in the world. This is Dr. Shell sauntering on.